Hey folks. So today I want to talk about masking. What is it? What does it look like? Sorry, I'm still trying to get over that cold. Um, so masking. Um, so masking basically is when you try and present as neurotypical to the world. Now, what does that mean? Um, Well, if you are undiagnosed as a child, it doesn't mean that you're not neurodivergent. You are. You just don't know it, and the people around you don't know it. And so, um, you grow up thinking, "Oh, I'm neurotypical." Like you don't really know what that means. You think, "Oh, normal." So you try and do things the way that society has told you or expected you to do. So things like being organized, on time, focused, not overly emotional, things that, we often have gotten in trouble for. And that's really hard because these are not things that come naturally to us. Some things might not. Not every single neurodivergent person struggles with focus or with inattention or with sitting still. Some people are very good at planning. Um, you know, so it's not like, oh, every single neurodivergent person struggles with every one of these things. But there are elements of these that most neurodivergent people struggle with. And so when you're masking, it's you are trying to present or behave as if you're neurotypical, as if you do not have these issues, or at least to the same degree or to the degree that you do. Because here's the thing. Apologies. Here's the thing, especially with ADHD. Um, so many of the behaviors that we do are behaviors that everybody does, and that's why it's so hard to classify it because or to for it to be seen as a legitimate disorder or condition because some people are like, oh well, I procrastinate or I struggle to get places on time, like that's normal. I forget things. Sometimes I get big emotions. It's like, yeah, you're right, you do, but not to the degree that we do. An example I like to use, maybe it's a little TMI, a little too graphic, but urinating. Everybody has to pee. However, if you need to pee 30 times a day, that's outside the clinical norm. Right? This is a behavior everybody does. But when you go outside what is considered normal or kind of an acceptable kind of range, that's where the issue becomes. Everybody gets sad. But clinical depression is intensity and duration. Same with anxiety. Same with a lot of things. So when these are things that you have struggled with your entire life, it's really hard. And you don't want to be seen as different or as abnormal, especially as a kid, especially as a teenager. You're so desperate to fit in. And so as an adult, you enter the world, especially if you are undiagnosed and you don't know that you're neurodivergent and you are trying your best to fit in, that's exhausting. That is so tiring. And when you are diagnosed and you're like, oh, now I understand why I have all of these struggles, that's great. That helps 100%. However, for a lot of people, they still may not feel safe to unmask, to be their authentic self, to be open about their diagnosis because of fear of not being believed or dismissed or invalidated or having their diagnosis used against them. I've seen this in my personal life. I've seen this in my professional life where people have said, I was open about having ADHD or autism or ADHD or really any kind of mental health concern. or diagnoses, or neurodevelopmental condition, and being denied raises, promotions, sometimes being let go. We tend to, neurodivergent people tend to have really hard, a really hard time holding on to jobs or getting jobs. Again, not everybody. There are some neurodivergent folks that do extremely well in their jobs, but there's a reason that the unemployment rate for neurodivergent folks is way higher than the typical population for a variety of reasons. Some of them legitimate, but a lot of it is also because of stigma, right? Perceptions of who we are, what we can do, what we can't do, or what they think that we can't do. And so for a lot of us, we mask, try to present as neurotypical. We're not always able to, or at least not successfully, or not to the degree that people can't see that there's something off. And so we're still impacted, still affected. I have had a very, very hard time holding on to jobs. There was a running joke in my family, amongst my friends, oh, how long is Rob going to have this job? Ha, ha, ha. And I'd play along, I'd laugh too. But inside, I was dying. It was killing me. Why? Why couldn't I hold on to jobs? I got my work done. I'm great at what I do. But I don't always do it exactly the way that managers want it. Clients love me. Most of them. It was managers, it was supervisors that I tended to have an issue with. And honestly, the ones that I had the worst experience were mainstream white organizations. Places where I had any sort of longevity in the workplace was typically indigenous organizations where I was trusted to do my work. I was treated like an adult. If I had an issue, I would go to them. I was supported. I wasn't micromanaged. So many times I would advocate for my clients because I had a raging old case of justice sensitivity, and management and the organization didn't like that. Right? My wife would be like, why can't you just shut up, play along to get along? God, I wanted to. I did. I couldn't. If I saw something that didn't make sense, or I didn't agree with, or that bothered me, or I thought wasn't fair, I would speak up. Usually at the cost of my job. That's why eventually I went out on my own. But that was terrifying. Given my track record, given the fact that I couldn't keep track of anything, I wasn't organized. It wasn't, anytime I had an evaluation, they're like, what is your weakness? Top thing was always management of time and organization. And I'll be honest, I'm not great at it now. I struggle constantly. But I'm my boss. Right? So masking is the either conscious or unconscious effort to appear as if you do not have some type of neurodivergence, to appear as if you are neurotypical. It is the intentional cutting off of parts of yourself, parts of your identity to fit into a place or with people or an environment. Now, I'm not going to say whether that's the right thing to do or wrong thing to do, because everybody's different. I am very open about my neurodivergence, but I also recognize I have a ton of privilege to do so. My work literally revolves around neurodivergence and working with people. So I have the privilege of being open about what I do, about who I am. Wasn't always like that. I'm also a white appearing straight male that's married, that has a child. I'm in my early 40s. I have a lot of privileges that allow me to speak from a place of relative safety. Not everybody has that. If you are a woman, a minority, somebody that has a more obvious physical disability, if you're very young or alternatively older, these are positions of vulnerability in our society. They shouldn't be, but unfortunately they are. And so there are people that don't feel safe to unmask around coworkers, bosses, sometimes around family, friends, partners. It can be very isolating and lonely. Masking itself is exhausting. Being neurodivergent, our brains are already working on overdrive. Right? I think it's Dr. Russell Barkley said, an ADHD brain is like a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes, which I feel is a pretty apt metaphor. So we are already struggling with all the simulation, all the information that's coming in. And then we have to try and pretend like we're not overloaded by this, that we're not confused by social situations. When I look back on how I interact with people, I'm shocked I didn't realize that I was autistic, because my God, I am so socially awkward. And it's been really hard to make and keep friends because of that. I've literally had people introduce me as, hey, this is Rob. He's a really great guy. He makes a horrible first impression. It's a lovely way to be introduced. I would try and mask. I would try and do what was socially appropriate or acceptable. People could always tell there was something a little off. I didn't know what it was. This is something that I have heard. This is something that I've heard both personally, I've experienced both personally and heard professionally from people is, I don't know who I am when they get diagnosed. They're trying to figure themselves out because they're like, who am I without the mask? I take the mask off, I feel like I don't have an identity. So that's another really difficult thing about masking is, well, what does that mean for you and for your identity? Right? It takes time and effort to try and learn about who you are without the mask, even if you feel safe to do so. That's not just you, it's people around you. In my own marriage, I've been married for 15 years. And, as I'm going through the process of, unlearning and learning, my wife has said to me, I don't feel like I know who you are. You're not the same person that I married. I'm like, you're right. I'm not. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. But I can see how it's confusing for her because I'm changing. And we all change as we get older. And that's normal, just as individuals and in relationships. But there's a big piece that kind of just got dropped in a few years ago that was there, but wasn't known. And that's hard. So sometimes, I mask because it's kind of the easiest thing for the people around me. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can't. So I would say the thing with masking is trying to figure out what makes sense for you. And where can you mask and how and in what ways that's safe? Can you do it with maybe a handful of people? You don't have to name what it is you're doing. You don't have to say, oh, I'm autistic or I'm ADHD or I'm ADHD or I'm OCD or whatever it may be. You can just try and be a little bit more your authentic self and see how people react. If this is something that you're struggling with, if this is something that you're not sure what the next steps are or how to navigate this, talking to somebody can help. Friends, family, professional. If you're located in Ontario, myself and my team would be happy to help. I have a few people that are online only. I have a few people that are able to do virtual. that we're able to do in person if you're in the London area. So if you want help kind of figuring out how to navigate this, please reach out. You can reach out through our website. So much information on our socials. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'd be more than happy to answer them and try and find you somebody that's a good fit that you can talk to about these things and explore who you are and what does it mean to be authentically you. Because even though it may be scary and it may be hard, and sometimes, a lot of times it's not easy, being who you are is the best person to be. So thanks for sticking around. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out, and I'll be here next week. You watch.